Red Bull has been repeating the same thing for weeks. Verstappen has a contract until 2028, Max is staying, everything is fine. However, while they keep repeating that, multiple sources claim that they have already identified his replacement, and that is Oscar Piastri. This isn't just another rumor, given everything that's happened recently. The tension between Piastri and McLaren that has been building up, the staff movements between Red Bull and McLaren, and a series of signs that, if you put them side by side, show a very clear story. For his part, Verstappen is very uncomfortable, and that's no secret. Several team members close to him have left. Formula One is heading away from what he sees as motorsport, and Red Bull is experiencing one of its worst periods in years. Furthermore, what makes this much more real is the existence of a clause in Verstappen's contract that would allow him to leave earlier than expected. But that's just the beginning, and today I'm going to tell you exactly why this story has much more depth than it seems. For Red Bull to be looking at Piastri, Verstappen has to leave, and for weeks the team's official position has been that this is not going to happen. Max has a contract, Max is staying, there's no conversation to be had. However, there are 3 signs that say otherwise. The first comes from the race. According to what was published a few months ago, Verstappen's contract includes a performance clause. If he's not among the top 2 in the championship by a certain date, he could trigger an early exit. Red Bull hasn't confirmed it, and neither has Verstappen. But if this clause exists, it would be really important considering the team's current situation. Red Bull is in one of its worst moments in years, and Max isn't even close to the top 2 in the championship. The second sign is the most important because it involves Verstappen, the departure of Helmut Marko. Marko was Max's mentor throughout his entire career at Red Bull. In fact, Verstappen made it clear more than a year ago when rumors started that Marko might leave. He said that if they fired him, he wouldn't stay with the project. In response, Red Bull made a strategic decision. They waited for the season to end, for the 2026 grid to be completely set, and for Verstappen to have no available destination. Then they fired Marko in what was a direct betrayal, not only towards him, but also towards Max. The third sign is the one least related to the team, but it's just as powerful as the previous ones. On more than one occasion, Max has said that this new Formula One with energy management, with cars that don't respond to his inputs, and with all the changes they're making is not the Formula One he loves. And this isn't just any comment from a driver frustrated with his car. It's a clear statement from someone who has been building up a possible exit for months. So with all this, it's clear to us why Max would leave Red Bull, but we're still missing the other side of the story. Why would Piastri leave a top team like McLaren to go to a declining team like Red Bull? Let's get into that. To understand why Red Bull has Piastri in their sights, first we need to understand why Piastri might want to leave. And to understand that, we have to go back to 2022. McLaren rescued him when Alpine played their cards wrong in the driver market. They signed him long-term and gave him the fastest car on the grid for 2 consecutive seasons. In other words, McLaren built Oscar Piastri in Formula One, and yet they have given the Australians strong reasons to want to leave. On one hand, there's Lando Norris, who has been at McLaren for many years. He is the world champion. He is the homegrown driver who grew up with the team, and on top of that, he is British. On the other hand, there's Piastri, who arrived later from the outside. And even though the team denies it, there is a clear difference in the way they treat both drivers. Monza 2025 is a clear example. Piastri was leading the championship and Verstappen was more than 100 points behind. Any way you looked at it, Oscar was the most important driver for McLaren at that moment. And even so, the team asked him to give the position back to Norris for something he had nothing to do with. Despite that, Oscar did it, quickly, without visible resistance, not much drama. However, when we compare it to what happened in the 2024 Hungarian Grand Prix when the situation was reversed and it was Lando who had to give up the position, it took a while. It wasn't immediate. There were multiple complaints, and despite that, there were no visible consequences for him. That symmetry shows who the favorite is in Woking more than anything else, and what happened next revealed the real effect of what happened in Monza. Piastri publicly admitted that that instruction affected him mentally, and it showed in Baku. He crashed in qualifying. He jumped the start, and on the first lap of the race, trying to recover positions, he crashed again. The same driver who a year earlier had won on that same circuit ended up crashing into the wall 2 days in a row, and as if that wasn't enough, there's an additional detail. Mark Webber, Piastri's manager. He was present at practically every Grand Prix for 2 consecutive seasons. He was a visible figure in the McLaren hospitality area every weekend. However, this season he's not there. There wasn't a gradual departure or any very clear public explanation. A manager doesn't hang around his driver's garage for no reason, but maybe there is a reason. And considering his past at Red Bull and how they've treated his client, it wouldn't be any surprise if he's looking for options outside the Woking team. Although this is pure speculation, and speaking of speculation, a few moments ago I told you the reasons why Verstappen might leave Red Bull, but I didn't tell you where he would go, so let's get into that. But before that, more than 90% of the people who watch my videos aren't subscribed to the channel. So if you're one of them or you're enjoying this video and want more like this, subscribe. If Verstappen leaves Red Bull, there are 3 main options. The first and the most interesting in terms of narrative is McLaren. Not because there's a rumor, but because there's a whole setup behind it. Jean-Pierre Holland Biase, Verstappen's race engineer for over a decade, is going to McLaren in 2028. Exactly when Max's contract ends. His official role is head of track operations, but from the Netherlands, there is information that goes even further, that his eventual position could be team principal, although McLaren denied this in Miami. Even so, Lambias is not coming alone. Rob Marshall, the man who brought Newbie's designs to life during Red Bull's most dominant era, is already at McLaren. Will Courtney, who led the sporting side during that same period, is there as well. 3 central figures from Red Bull's golden era reunited in the Woking team. In that scenario, Verstappen would arrive at McLaren and find his own engineer, the technical infrastructure that made him great, and a culture built on the same foundations as Red Bull, but without the toxicity that destroyed the team. And the answer to which driver would leave McLaren is clear, so a swap with Piastri would be the most logical. The second option is Mercedes. Toto Wolff has been after Verstappen for years, and between them there's a story that goes beyond Formula 1. Also, on the other side of the garage would be Antonelli, a driver with whom Max has a good relationship and without the political baggage that would come with being Norris's teammate. But from the Netherlands, the information is contradictory. Some say the door is open, while others say it closed when Max turned down an offer last year. But in the driver market, the reality is that few doors ever close completely. And then there's the third option, the one nobody wants to accept, retirement or something like it. This week, Max is racing in the 24 Hours of Nürburgring. Ford is in talks with him for their WEC program starting in 2027. Verstappen has said for months that this Formula 1 focused on energy management and new rules isn't the Formula 1 he fell in love with. So a retirement or a sabbatical year doesn't seem crazy at all. In any of those 3 cases, Red Bull would be left with an empty seat to fill, and that's where the questions begin. Is Piastri the right choice? Does it benefit the Australian? Are there alternatives? Let's find out. This is where things get complicated for Piastri. The question isn't just if he wants to leave McLaren, but if moving to Red Bull now makes sense. And the answer, considering the current context, is no, not yet. Red Bull is at the back of the pack. The technical direction is being rebuilt from scratch. And the estimate within the paddock is that it will take them between 2 and 3 years to be competitive again, leaving McLaren, which can still win races and fight for the title. To leave for a team that is being rebuilt from scratch doesn't make sense. Although, as I mentioned in the previous point, if McLaren decides to go for Max and he accepts, Oscar wouldn't have many options left. However, Piastri is not the only option that Red Bull would have on the table. Carlos Sainz is another option. He knows Lauren Makis from his years at Ferrari. He has a history in Formula 1 of guiding struggling teams and improving them from within. And finally, he is someone who has already been part of the Red Bull family. On the other hand, George Russell is another real option, especially if Verstappen decides to go to Mercedes. And since I find it impossible to see those two as teammates, in addition to the affection that Toto Wolff has for Antonelli, everything is being evaluated and only time will tell what happens. Also, there's something very important. If you like this video, subscribe. If you're already subscribed and want more from your Formula 1 experience, become a channel member for a passionate fan community and extra benefits. See you next time.